Thank you. Thank you. This was, very briefly, the reason that I wanted to include that is it was a strange business model for us. We normally work for production companies or agencies. In this case, a client approached us. So G-Star came to us, and they had a fairly clear idea in their marketing minds what they wanted. It turns out the film was very different from what they originally wanted. They gave us a fairly broad amount of time, but they said, you've got a very fixed budget. Don't come asking for any extra money. There's not going to be any extra money. Don't make any changes. Don't suggest anything that can't be fitted in with this money. If you fuck it up, you fucked it up. That's the easiest way they could say it. But they said you've got about 4 months to do it, which is a real luxury for us. So what we did is we immediately carved off a month at the beginning just for storyboards, bouncing ideas around, drawing up sketches, style frames, and bouncing these back with the client, always backwards and forwards. 4 weeks luxury, just research, R&D development time. But it meant that by the time we finished that 4 weeks, that was with one person. We finished that 4 weeks, and we had such a complete, such a precise idea of how to move into production that by the time we moved into production, we still kept a very small team. It was started off at 2, went to 3, and I think at its widest, it was about 4 or 5 people. So we completed the project, but with a very, very tiny group of people. The client got exactly what they wanted at the end of it because they'd invested the time to plan up front. They'd involved us early. The urgency was kind of taken out. Obviously, we had a deadline looming, so we had to deliver it at a certain date. But all time, we felt in control, and the client felt in control because they judged it just right on that. And the key thing was we really left that project as friends. There was no fraught relationship. You're friends with the agency, but you've pissed off the director, or the other way around. It was all round a very nice mix. It's rare. The next thing is Honda. It's a project we did. It was released a couple of months ago, maybe 3 months ago. The key thing with this is it's a follow-on from the Honda Illusions, I think it was. The idea is it's creating a Drost sequence, so a picture within a picture within a picture. They came to us and they pitched the idea of an endless commercial, which I imagine advertising agencies love the idea of. For us, it was terrifying. I'll play the film, and then I'll play the making of over it, and I'll talk over that. Bear with me.
Greater efficiency, economy, performance. The road to great is endless.
Also, I'm sorry for putting that song in your head. We had that in the office for 4 months. It's kind of burnt on, like burning on the screen. Again, I'll try and get through this quickly, but the key thing, I'll tell you, I'll play the making of, and I'll crank the sound down. So you'll see disembodied heads talking, and you won't listen to what they're saying. You have to listen to me. Again, there was an investment of research up front, but originally we were just brought on board to do the animatic. So the animatic is a very simple layout where it's just timings, positionings, things like that. It went very well. We then moved on to the animatic became a layout, and the layout is obviously more precise. It's whereas every building, every tree, every bunny rabbit, the car at very precise times. Where is all of this exactly going to be? Because everything that you design in 3D space is then going to be built by model makers, which really annoys the model makers because they want to get started very early, and we want to carry on as long as possible to make sure that it's right, or at least the director wants to carry on as long as possible to make sure that it's right. But in this case, yeah, we spent. The difference was the project lasted 4 months. 3 months was planning, 1 month was execution. So it's the reversal of the G-Star model, but it was completely necessary. The guy that led the 3D team for us is a very experienced guy. He used to be head of 3D over at the Mill. He's been working in the industry for about 20 years, and he said that this was the hardest project that he'd ever worked on, just because the maths were mind-bending and horrible. You have to rotate the camera through 180 degrees to match perfectly with the beginning of effectively the same camera move. But every time you finish a camera move, all the lighting has to rotate 180 degrees. Everything will have shrunk to the power of 10, and you have to pick that up seamlessly and then add in things like rabbits and birds. But the reason that I wanted to flag this up is a good argument for not being too urgent with things is while we were doing this, the director really pushed us. He said, I want to see what it looks like at dawn. I don't know what the final commercial is going to look like. I want to see it at dawn. Now I want to see it at night. What would it look like if it was raining or snowing? What would it look like? What would it look like? What would it look like? And we created about, I think it was 250 versions of the same commercial. And maintained a smile throughout. But it really was the endless road. But we did all these versions, and we were just expecting this was purely so that he could work out what he wanted from a 60-second TV commercial. We always knew there was going to be a digital back end. There was going to be an experience. The endless looping commercial was going to live on YouTube, and it was going to be really cool because it never ended. But when they finally passed all of the stuff over to the digital company, it was the director's idea, but he said, what if we could actually not waste any of the lighting conditions or the weather conditions that we used? Is there a way that we can build that into the digital experience so that it's not lost? So the clever people at the digital company came up with the idea that when you look at it on YouTube, it would read your IP address. So it would decide, it would work out what the weather is doing outside your window and then imprint that weather condition on the YouTube video that you're watching. I can't do that now, of course. You have to do that yourself. And then they put a few presets in there so you can choose Moscow or Tokyo or something. But that became, for me, that became the most interesting thing, the fact that the ad would adapt itself to your location, and you'd be able to see the same car in all of these different lighting environments. But that only came out of the fact that there was so much research and all of this time to develop and explore things. If you take all that away, the digital experience would have been less, in my opinion. And I hope they do well. I hope the digital company do well if they put it into awards and things. But again, without the time, you don't get these little ideas, these happy accidents. There's a sort of sub-point to this as well. The next project I'll play is a project we did at the big end of last year for Lycra. This is the idea of understanding chronology, so the order of events, the way in which they have to happen leading on from each other. I'll play the film first. Oh, hello, quiet film.
Let's move, little stranger. Show me secret scenes. Love can be like bonding. Seduce me once again. Burning like an angel who has heaven in reprieve. Burning like the voodoo man with devils on his sleeve. Won't you move with me in my world of fantasy? Won't you move with me? Ritual fertility.
So that film, I'll talk very briefly about this one. The idea is simply, the director had an idea, the agency had the idea, which was this sort of this dance which creates the fabric trails after it. We came in, and again, the sort of the time, the preparation that we put in at the beginning, realized that all the dance moves they'd choreographed were wrong. It wouldn't work in the film because every time they did a spin, their arm would cut through material. Every time the guy lifted the girl, he'd like push her through the material, but it wouldn't register. So in a way, the research had to happen. The research and all the testing of the technical side of things had to happen before they could choreograph the dance. So every time they did a turn, they had to, instead of completing the turn, they had to turn back and then fit that into the dance. The position of the elements around them, I think there was like a bus stop in there, the girl on the desk. All of these things had to be taken into account of what would happen when the fabric hit it or bounced off it or went through it. So yeah, again, before the dancing, before the choreography, before the sets could be designed, before the cameras could start rolling, all of the preparation had to be done in advance. Again, it's not something that you can do without. You can't just cut that out because it's going to really give you an enormous back end of problems and headache at the end, I guess. I'm going to jump a slide because I'm conscious that I'm going to be going over, so get out of it. The next urgency is terrible on his own. He plays best with his friends called skill and experience and their mate trust.
They get away first time. Tyson Gay right alongside Usain Bolt, but here he goes, streaking away already. It's Bolt all the way. He's looking round at Gay. What's the...
Short. Usain Bolt, if you ask anybody how long it took Usain Bolt to run 100 meters and break the world record, they'd say if they knew 9.58 seconds. But it took him and a very big team of people 20 years to get there. He had an extremely good team around him. He put the blood, sweat and tears in for 20 years, honing his body, his technique, his training, very, very disciplined, and then achieves this. If you switch the 100 meters race with a very complex visual project or a digital project line, or pick on me, put me on the lineup and then say, I'm going to fire the gun and I need you to do that, I'm going to give it a really, really good go, but I'm going to mess it up. And this is where, if you have any sort of project which has extreme time constraints, extreme budget constraints, anything that already handicaps you from the beginning, the best thing you can do for your projects is deal with experts, everything from direction through to digital, through only deal with people that have done this stuff before and they know what they're doing, because they're going to hit the ground running very, very quickly, and they're going to be able to offer very quick, like sort of money and time-saving solutions, I guess.